Welcome to Philly Coco Presents Side Project Spotlight, Episode 20. This is a developer's journey into making cool stuff. We are your paired programmers in this lifelong development sprint. I'm Kotaro.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Aaron.
And we are Philly Coco, a Philadelphia-based Cocoa Heads community focused on Apple development. That primarily, but not exclusively, means iOS, Mac, tvOS, and watchOS development. Philly Coco's true desire is to take you higher on your own development journey. All right.
Very nice. And
20 episodes.
You only started breaking up right at the very end when you were finished talking.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we got a nice robot sigh.
Yeah, that was good.
Okay.
We're going to leave that in.
Yeah, okay, we'll leave that in. Oh, no, this is going to be a challenging episode, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's going to be fun to edit. So what's on the agenda today?
On the agenda today is we're kind of going back into talking about our progress on our to-do list app, PickleJar, and at least codename PickleJar.
Yeah, we don't know what it's actually going to be.
Yeah.
But we have made some progress, so there you go.
Yes, we have. I had sort of, rock and roll the code, if we will, to just get the basic functionality in. So now we can add the goals or your to-dos, kind of like a broad to-do, if you will, and then logs for each of these goals. So kind of like you define a goal. I want to do 25 push-ups a day, and then you can add a log of like every time you do it, yes or no, and maybe a progress note associated with each one of those logs. And that's my contribution for this particular sprint. Obviously it was sort of like doing a lot of that stuff in the view. So Steve generously went in and helped clean that up for me. So thank you, Steve.
Oh, yeah. So you were doing the UI, so I figured I would try working on the back end. And I've been going, and I guess we can, we'll talk about more in a minute, see what Aaron's update is. But I was trying to just centralize some of our code. We'll talk about that as the architecture I was going for in a minute. When my voice comes back, too. Oh, my God.
Yeah, not much of an update from me other than like reviewing some of the code that other people are doing.
Well, that's
because we don't have a lot of like tasks broken out like we had last time. So I'm kind of like floating around here, not knowing what I'm doing. And also maybe not having as much time as last time. But
yeah, I'm carving out some more time. That's why I was doing the work. Maybe we should make a list of stuff.
Maybe a to-do.
Yeah. Although I am trying to dog food it a little bit. It's a work in progress. So that's our status. We basically have something where you can create what we call goals, and you can actually update the status of these goals, which we're calling logs. And we have basic UI that uses like standard lists and stuff for that. And it does save in the CloudKit, and it synchronizes between devices because of that. That all works.
So can you explain how, our reasoning for using, how you do that with CloudKit? How do you test that to make sure it syncs between devices? Just for our viewers.
Yeah. The way I'm testing it is a couple of ways. I guess one way is, just to relaunch the simulator fresh and see if it downloads it. But another way is you can install it on your device and then also have it work in your simulator to make sure it works. And you just have to be logged in the same iCloud account. I find the iCloud stuff to be a little bit annoying because iCloud, when you're logged into a device, it really wants you to be just one iCloud account. Like you can't easily switch iCloud accounts on iPhone. So you really want to be in as your main one because otherwise it's such a huge hassle to switch and delete the data and bring it back in and stuff. But then you end up using your actual iCloud account to log into Simulator 2, and you just kind of hope that you don't do any damage.
Make sure you don't sync anything. You don't want to sync anything or copy anything from the simulator's device, which we will say if you want to merge it or not. I actually found that if you do like an iPad simulator, you run the iPad simulator and the iPhone simulator at the same time, which actually makes sense, and then sign into the one iCloud account to both of those. That actually is a little easier for me.
Do you use a different iCloud account or your main one?
Just my main one. Although, honestly, you should use a test one.
Yeah, I know. I should probably make another test one and just do that.
But I do have another one actually. That's not entirely true. I do have another one that I would use, but it's been a long time, so I haven't remembered to do that properly.
I don't know. I feel like the iCloud stuff is a little more annoying than it should be to handle multiple iCloud accounts, but that's always been the case. I've been complaining about Apple IDs for years, like the inability to easily manage multiple ones.
So now you had moved a lot of the sort of the business logic outside. I had basically like put the business logic of like adding logs and deleting logs inside the views themselves, which of course don't do, particularly because we're using core data CloudKit sync. So you did it in kind of what I would think is like the standard way, or at least the sort of agreed upon way, or the popular way to do things with SwiftUI, which is sort of like an MVVM style approach.
Yeah. So it's fine at first to put stuff into views when you're like prototyping and working quick. It's not a big deal. But because you were working on the UI, I figured I would clean it up as you went along, and I started using. I've been going through I think it's CS193P or something like that. It's a CS193 Stanford class, just because it's actually a well structured undergraduate class all about SwiftUI and how to build apps. And they have a lecture, I think it's lecture 3, where they really go into the architectural pattern that they think SwiftUI demands. They present it more like this is actually how SwiftUI works, but it's more like just what which seems like the best approach. But they talk about MVVM. Now, the thing about MVVM is like its model view model is there's not really one standard approach to it. And in CS193, they're not using core data, so it's also different from us. But the idea is like if in a standard UI kit app, you have your model, your view, and your controller, and you often have a bunch of crap in the controller. And like the controller is the intermediary though between your model, which is like not just your data, but like your logic and business logic and stuff, and then your views. But in MVVM, because it's a React based thing, what you need is your model is always has to be the source of truth. So you don't want to be making copies of the data for your model that you're modifying or somewhere, and then you always want to make sure that whenever you make a change to the model data, it's literally made in the model, and whenever something changes in the model, you're updating it, reflecting UI. So the UI in SwiftUI is supposed to always be a direct reflection of the state of your model. So the way you do that is with MVVM. So you have this intermediary view model class, which is kind of like it's kind of like a filter over top of your model. So and that's where you would put you'd expose maybe some subset of your model to your views. Like if you have a big complicated bunch of data items and maybe your views only need some subset of that, you could expose it that way. So the point is you just don't want to be bringing in like your entire model into your views. You want to have this intermediary to keep things clean and tidy. And so what I did was I just started with one class because it's part of the UI layer, but it has to, in our case, has to do with core data. So I made it a class, and you want it to be basically observable, and then you want to start putting the logic in there. So you had areas where you were like save log or something like that, or save goal, and then I moved that into a function in there, and in the view, I linked it up, and I put a comment in called user intents to try to make this clearer. But my intention is that when you're in a view, you're trying to map the user's intent. So like, what is from the user's perspective, what is that user trying to do? And then you name things that way. And that doesn't necessarily match exactly the way it is in the back end. But you want everything on the view layer to be very much oriented towards the interactions with the user. and then you call like a user. I think they call this like a user intent function in the CS class. So I thought it was a pretty good name. And then that's in the view model is where then you're going to do whatever you need to do. So the reason you have an intermediary class, by the way, is because you might do more than just update a simple database row or one model. You might be making multiple changes. You might be calling out to some API somewhere. You might be doing a bunch of processing. You might be completely transforming the data structures. That's something that we can talk about doing. I think we're going to want to do that. And the problem I ran into, and I'm going to stop talking in a second so we can get your opinion, but the core data adds an extra wrinkle because core data really does not is not really compatible with the whole Swift and structs and Swift UI way. Like it's bolted in there in different ways, and there's some convenience methods that Apple has come up with, like FetchRequest wrapper, but I don't think that they're necessarily the right architecture to use when you're trying to do things, but like quote unquote the right way. So I don't even know if we're going to use some of that. And the thing about core data, of course, it's all class based. It's all, I think, still Objective C in the back end, right? It's definitely not structs like Swift structs. So you have to do some kind of conversions between the two worlds, and I feel like that's going to be a little bit of a challenge in places. And I've done some research, and like nobody has a great solution. Everybody has like their own opinion about how to do it.
All your data models are all optionals in a lot of ways. So like every time you want to check on the log's title or something like that, you have to check for, you have to unwrap it basically to know whether there's something there or not. So either we would have to create sort of like an abstract, like basically convert that to all the objects that come back. The like when we do a fetch request and we bring them back, we're bringing them back as an array of that particular object. Well, to a set to an effect. And then we have to sort of like when we pull them out, when we look at the actual items themselves, like all your your specific log, you have to check if there's something even there.
Yeah, I mean, it may be beneficial to map the actual core data models into structs at the view model and then expose them. I'm not sure yet because I haven't really worked too much in there. I started going down the route to see how to maybe better expose these things. But from the view perspective, it would be nice if we just had like a struct to grab, and then when that changed, because there's like a built-in support, you can monitor like when structs change. That's very easy to get updates on. So that's the ideal format, I guess, for the view model, stuff to take so the view can consume it. I just don't know how much of a hassle it'll be. In other languages, I've done, that don't have the structs thing, but I've done things where like trying to create intermediary classes between like a model and then how the consumers are going to consume it and stuff, and like a data transfer object is like one approach for like APIs. And it can work, it can be great, or it can be a bunch of duplicated effort, and you want to be careful, you're not, I guess, just duplicating things. But I do think it's, in general, in my experience, it's worth putting effort into keeping this stuff separated, because eventually you're going to come back to this code, you're going to want to make a change to it. And if you have bits of your model and your logic scattered all over the place, it's just a lot harder to update later on down the line. And as for the core data specific stuff that Apple provides, you were using FetchRequest wrappers, right? FetchRequest, that was called? The property wrapper?
It's basically it's a very simple way to do a basic fetch request, and you can customize it in a lot of different ways. You can add sorting, you can add predicates to it so that you can filter it down to a certain subset of all your logs, or maybe and then you can even set limits on that of like how many comes back at a time. So you can do things that are that is a very easy way to like create your list of let's say in our case goals, and then display them in the for loop. And if you do any modifications, it will dynamically, like if you delete a goal or something like that, it will dynamically update the it does all that work for you to update the list for you.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what to do about these because, man, it's like it provides this functionality, but it violates the separation of concerns because now you're putting your query logic to some extent in your views, and it assumes that you have your managed object context in the environment. So the way that like the default template for core data and SwiftUI has you inject core data into your views is, you put the managed object context in the environment, and then you use stuff like the FetchRequest wrappers, and then that, if you even read the documentation, it tells you that assumes that it's there, and that's where it looks to do its core data interaction. But if you want to separate this stuff into a completely separate like view model class or whatever you want to call it, I don't think you can't really do that, right? Like, because it's the FetchRequest wrapper is not designed. It's designed to be used in like a view, right? So it's like you basically have to duplicate that, I guess, in your view model. You have to duplicate some of that logic, and it's I haven't gotten it to work yet. I started looking at it, and I had to stop because it was getting late, and I was like, oh, this is going to be more complicated than I was hoping because I'm not sure if it's worth it. I want everything to be clean, but it's like Apple fighting me on doing a clean architecture. At least at my current level of understanding of this stuff. I mean, it's possible there's like core data SwiftUI people are like, oh, it's easy, you just don't understand. That's true. We do not understand. So,
I mean, it's kind of funny because I'm thinking about it I'm trying to remember if Fave 10 had the same problem so Fave 10 is my old top 10 app that I have not updated past like Swift 1. So Swift 1 or maybe Swift 2. Yeah, I mean, it's really old.
Swift UI 1. Right?
Swift UI 1, I'm sorry. Sorry. Apologies. Oof. Man, I wish this coffee would kick in faster. But yeah, so like, and I don't remember if FetchRequest was in that version, but I'll have to take a look and see.
You don't have to use the FetchRequests.
No, you don't. I'm just saying it's a convenience that it's so convenient in some ways. Like, it's the thing with Apple and their templates and their examples. They're not always great examples of how you quote unquote should do things if you want an app that is like maintainable in the long run, or maybe has lots of people working on it or something in a professional capacity. But they give you these features that make it easy to get something that works.
I mean, I guess it would be a fair question to ask whether or not when you do a fetch request in the view, and then you have a view model, you could technically add that into the binding of the class. Sorry, not the class. The observable object that you're trying to like suck that in. But then it's like adding a dependencies where you don't want them to be, right?
Yeah, I mean, assuming you could get it to work outside like the view, maybe could, right? It still requires you have your managed object context in the environment, and then that means that managed object context is available everywhere, and it's like, I don't actually want that. I was trying to move the managed object context into the view model as a reference there, so that we had only one place you can control access to it. Because that's what the view model is supposed to do. So, like, from a pure architecture level, like, I don't want it sitting in the environment, because then technically anything in your any view could then grab it and do things directly to the model, bypassing your view model intermediary, which, when you're just doing it yourself or a couple other people as a side project, probably doesn't matter. But if you're if you imagine this could be a problem if you had a big app like, some giant, app with hundreds and hundreds of people working on it and stuff, and then you had some developer come in, doesn't realize that you're not supposed to use the managed object context directly or something like that. Like, that's why you design things with these architectural patterns and try to keep separation concerns, because you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot later. Now, for us specifically, it may not matter, so.
I guess I can, since I'm not doing much else on this thing right now, I can like start looking at completely pulling the all the fetch requests and stuff like that. Because I think that's what I did in the watch app. I don't know. I think I eventually got rid of all the fetch requests from the views, but I don't know.
Like, I mean, yeah, the fetch requests. I would. my plan was to move that stuff to view models or the view model however we have it set up, and then just expose the results to the views.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. I don't know.
I mean, you can set a list of arrays of maybe even abstracting out, like converting the fetch request results to the array of fetch request results into struct versions of that object.
Yeah, I mean, I think you use map. You could map stuff into structs. I've seen that this is a technique I saw on some YouTube video. Let me see. Do I have this video up? I don't. This is from 2021. I don't know who this guy is. Oh wait, AZAM Sharp. Yeah.
He's really good.
So he had a video here about, and I started looking through it just a little bit. It said core data in SwiftUI using the MVVM design pattern, and that's I think what he was doing in there, which he was just mapping things into a struct. So I haven't finished watching that, but that's another one of the research tools. As I said, there's not a lot of people that have like really published a lot of stuff on this. Like I haven't found a good book on it or anything yet.
I have to wonder if that's just because nobody wants to touch core data.
Yeah, I'm like I was like, why don't we just make our own database interface like class? Because this is kind of annoying. But I've never really worked with core data to a large extent on an app before. I've done like my own data caching to the file system and my own data management. Like I built like whole things.
For scenarios like this, definitely like a to-do list style of an app, core data makes a lot of sense to me.
It's also buying us the sync. Let's not forget that. Like that's the main reason in my mind is everybody expects that you be able to sync between devices, especially if you're doing a cross-platform app. And honestly, there's no easier way of doing that on Apple's platforms right now besides using this, unless you want to use like Firebase or something. But we're trying to stick within the Apple ecosystem for the side project. Yep. So this is the easiest way, as far as I know, to get syncing.
Right.
And it's a hard problem, so I don't want to have to solve it for a side project.
Yeah, for side projects, it's just quick and dirty, more quick and dirty than necessary. Like, I mean, if learning how to sync is your thing, then definitely go the route. Maybe come up with like a Vapor app, server-side Vapor app, and, go Swift all the way. That might actually be a fun project, to be honest, and then learn sync that way. But, I've done sync before for another company, and it's not fun. So the joke was, sync is hard.
Yeah, sync is incredibly hard. I'd be curious one day to talk to you about how you did it, because that's like a serious problem in computer science, like how to sync kinds of stuff.
It gets complicated. I mean, it's weird because like sometimes it's always trying to define who and what is the source of truth at any given time, and then time becomes the variable if your app is a globally distributed app, or even if the person travels to, England or whatever, and they're using your app to sync their, the application, you have to make sure you're following UTC time, for example, to make sure that the relation. You're not like one is not overriding the other because you got the time zone wrong or something like that.
Yeah, so you're breaking up a little bit there, but I think we got the gist.
So I think if both you and Aaron can kind of explore that architecture a little bit, it might actually be like a nice, fun little project to figure out like what is a more optimal, what's an optimal MVVM style for SwiftUI, and whether you can move the fetch request or mimic it in a much more clean way.
I have a branch and a pull request with the very basic beginning stuff where I moved some of your stuff into the view model, so we can look at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I've but I've made some comments, and I have to run it and make sure that it's functionally working. And if all good, I'll just push it back. I'll just approve it. Yeah,
I expect it to change a lot. This is just like the first attempt. I'm trying to not become an architect astronaut, and so I just start with like one class. And one of the things that was interesting about it, we might want to talk to viewers, or the listeners, is a comment you made where you were interested in that I created a custom environment variable.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I didn't know was possible, but I wanted to, so I looked it up. So right now it's just called view model, but you know, in the environment you can add. There's these keys that are already pre-made, like manage object context is one of them. So it's like // or whatever, manage object context, whatever that is, and then you stick the manage object context there, and then that's how you inject in the environment. Well, you could do your own custom ones, and it's actually not that hard. It's like one paragraph in the documentation and like a little screenshot and explains it. And the only thing that threw me off a little bit is like you have to create like a struct with like the key, but then I think it needs to take a default implementation.
Yeah.
But then I have no idea if it'll work if I just called. I'm not sure what that means. Does that mean if I just grab it from the environment and I haven't manually injected it, it'll just call the default implementation? Like I don't know what that means, because it's like so I don't know what it means, but I did that. So basically that just means I call the the constructor. But there's a couple of structs, and then you give it a name, like I call it a view model, and then you can just stick it in the environment. It's just in there. Now I didn't run any kind of profiling to see if I have created some massive memory leaks or something. So fingers crossed I haven't done that. But it was cool.
I mean, is it fair to think of it kind of like you've created a sort of default like global environment of a global variable that you have access to anywhere in the app? Is that
that's what it is. I mean, it makes sense, because if you use the environment in like a shell environment or something in some kind of server based software, you're the one that usually determines what those are called, what those variable names are.
Right. Right. So I guess because I guess metaphorically that's kind of like more of our data, a core data store, or you can kind of look at it, or a core data manager in a way, because we add the add goal functionality.
Yeah, I mean,
put that in there
right now. That's all it's doing. But I mean, technically, if it's not just about core data, but right now it is, because that's the only thing implemented. But yeah, it's the intermediary class that I consider the view model, but because its main job is to provide some view of the model to the views, and also to handle user intents from the views. But yeah, if you named it something different, whatever. But yeah, right now it has a reference to the core data manage object context, and then it does all the core data stuff in there, saves things and syncs them, and then you call the functions in this class from the views.
Gotcha. I think we still have to add all the extra ones that we had, and this kind of goes into our kind of like UI UX discussion or conversation that we sort of had prior to this, in terms of how we want to lay out the app. Because right now what we have is a very basic sidebar nav, detail nav, like a traditional iOS app style, which is like you got a list of goals, and then you got detail stuff in the in the right pane, so to speak. So we have functionalities to add tags, which, or another way to describe them, is categories for like the types of goals. So if you have like a exercise type of goal versus like a diet type of goal, I assume that's kind of like how these tags would kind of work, or like what is it, business versus maybe like leisure, or not leisure, dietary.
I was thinking maybe you'd want more structure, or maybe you'd want to do something more complicated than just track like a handful of these at a time.
Yeah. So
something like Notes, for instance, has tags. It has folders and stuff, and I thought about doing folders, but I was like, maybe that's going a little too much. Like, maybe we're trying to keep it simple. So like tags are kind of an intermediary. You can kind of use a tag like a folder system if you want, if you're consistent. But it's like a cross-cutting thing. So maybe you want to organize your goals in different ways. Yeah. Like you want to organize them by fitness goals, or you want to organize it by, as you said, the work-related stuff versus personal stuff. Whatever. You can tag things and then have them displayed and so you can filter your list of them. I think it's really useful, potentially useful, if you have a lot of goals. But I'm not sure that's the best way of using the app. But but
you know what's interesting? I just noticed now that you mentioned it in the Swift, the Notes app, if it will only show the tags if you've actually put the hashtag in it, right? So like in your notes, if you put hashtag Swift UI, it will actually create the tag for you by default.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
It's pretty neat. I don't use a lot of tags. I don't think I really use them much in Notes. I always forget they're there.
Like if I type in like hashtag Twitter, I'll finally be able to see all my Twitter accounts, my Twitter notes. Yeah, that's it. It worked just like I said. Nice. Learned something new just right now. So yeah, I actually think that would be kind of an interesting, like, because it's so like flexible, like nebulous in a flexible way that would probably try to cater to the user's needs versus like what we would perceive. Like we would not know exactly how they would use it, and obviously we wouldn't necessarily care.
Yeah.
Could you apply multiple tags per goal? And this is for goals, I assume, right? Or can you tag a tag to logs as well?
I think they were just on goals in the current model. Yeah, you could do multiple ones. Why not?
Yeah, because I think, because then that might be. And again, like I think we sort of struggle with a couple things with the UI or the UX of this, right? In terms of like. There was recently an app called Habits, I believe that's what it's called, that just won an ADA award. Really beautiful, well-designed app. And it's very clear these people are inspired sort of by game design. So they have a lot of well-designed haptics, beautiful sound, a score, and a click button that you press and you hold down to identify whether or not you've accomplished. Like you hold it down, it like starts to ramp up and like it like explodes into like, hey, a big checkbox, and then like your whole phone like has a little bit of a click that's nice and satisfying and very custom. Now I know Steve, you're like, which I agree.
I was like, this is too much. I'm not a huge fan of the user interface of that app. I understand why it won, and it's very impressive. It's not my cup of tea. But it is very impressive, and there's a whole article about that checkbox, right? Is there some audacious title to it? The article was like the most satisfying checkbox, or something like that.
Yeah. That's I think you can find a link via Daring Fireball. Shout out to you, John Grubert. Let's see, fellow Philadelphian and Drexel alumni.
Yeah, the world's most satisfying checkbox.
Yep.
And it's I think it's I found it on Andy.works.
Yes.
I'll put the link in the show notes. Now,
I would view an app like that as very extra.
Yes, it's extra, but it does have a useful core, solid core, and then they put all this really great design on top of it.
And there's some things we could probably not necessarily ape, but sort of borrow a little bit of. Yeah. In terms of the simplicity, the focus on simplicity, the focus on sort of like a very basic layout, which that's the part that I kind of want to sort of borrow in terms of not so much the click, because I do agree the click is...
Their layout, you mean like they have these choices of different like 3D little mini environments that get built up as you progress?
That part, no, because...
I want to use Swift charts for that, just like or something.
Oh, well, if you want to do it, then that's fine. I think for me, it was much more about like get in, get out, like do the thing, maybe get like just an update status of where how well you're doing, and then using the chart system or whatever, Swift charts, and then go about your day.
Yeah, I mean the focus should be on. We've talked about this before about showing what your current goals are and like how your status is toward them, and get reminders to maybe to update them. But it's not the core mechanic is not entering new goals. Like I don't imagine that we originally started this with the PickleJar concept, which is that you pick like your most important things to do. And I still think that makes sense for this, because how many like long-term goals or whatever can you have at one time they're actually actively working towards?
Sure.
So I feel like the main focus should be on highlighting what those are and getting you to update, getting you to think, to do something to them, and then be like, did you actually do something? So
yeah. So I think one of the things that when trying to dog food it would be sort of like the goal from a functional standpoint. Like my goal might be something as simple as like 25 push-ups a day, right? Would be the constant goal. But there's no end to that. There's no end game to that. That's just like a habit that you build and you're trying to continue to build, and maybe you would like to see how well you do per day. And you don't need a dedicated to-do list app for that.
No.
But it's kind of one of the things where that's where the value of like trying to say, well, we're committed to like providing you long-term data of how well you perform over time.
Well, I have a goal of publishing this app. So if that comes up regularly and reminds me that I haven't worked on it in like a couple days or something, that would be useful. Just guilt trip me into putting more work into it. But no, that's a long-term goal that has not a specific end date, but it's the kind of thing where in a traditional to-do list app like OmniFocus or something, that doesn't really work for me, because I'm like, I don't specifically know all the tasks involved with it. I just want to make sure I'm working on it regularly, and it's not a habit per se. It's like a habit maybe for a period of time, but that's the kind of thing I was thinking of when I was thinking of goals. So that's why I have one to track in there.
I mean, I do wonder to some degree, like how broad or how specific these goals need to be, right? Like if we're saying, I want to do a sprint-related goal of like, let's just take this example, like MVVM. Like I want to move all my code into MVVM, right? And I have a deadline of till 2 weeks from now. Is that something we want to make as a part of as something to do for this type of app, for this to allow for this app?
Yeah, there are sprints in the model, and I guess the question is, are they mandatory? I don't think I envision them necessarily as mandatory, but it was more like if you want to focus on something, like especially if you have my thinking was, especially if you have a whole bunch of goals in here, like this could be your someday maybe list if you're thinking in terms of GTD. And you want to work on a couple of these in some, like maybe the next week or the next 2 weeks or something like that, whatever you define as your sprint, then you can add them to this, and then that becomes like your focus. Then the app will like, make sure it's showing you your progress during this particular sprint. So that would then affect what it would affect what is being highlighted to you, and also would be potentially changing what metrics you're seeing, because then you'd be doing it in terms of the sprint and not in terms of like, did you do anything, period. It'd be like, did you, like if you're doing the push-ups one and you had a sprint and it's like a 1 week long sprint, it's like, well, then you actually can figure out how many, you can figure out like what percentage of success you've had, for instance, at the end of a sprint pretty easily. So, stuff like that is opened up because you're adding that extra piece of context of a specific time, period of time. But I don't know if it should be mandatory. We could just be like opinionated, it'd be like, yeah, you have to put things into a sprint. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if we want to. I think it kind of depends on how we feel about using it.
Yeah, I guess as we dog food it, and I think it bears repeating of like what we have on our schedule in terms of like how we want to get when our time frame of when we want to get this app out, right? So like the development schedule. I'm just gonna quickly repeat it just so we fully know where we're at the moment. So by the end of this month, we have to finalize the layout and UI flow. July we have to implement the prototype. So basically we have to sort of start working on it, getting it into a fully functional thing, which actually I think we're kind of ahead of schedule. I mean, we have. I mean, I said it's enough that I'm sort of dogfooding it as best I can right now.
So it barely works. So it's like pre MVP.
Yeah, I think the only thing we're missing is like deleting and maybe like the tag mechanic. And
there's a lot of things missing, but like you can at least store data.
And like I guess I don't think we added the time, the frequency, whatever we called it, like the start date, end date mechanic. So if we can add that functionality just as a sort of dog fooding, to get it to a point where we can dog food it realistically, then I think that would actually be that'll actually help us even further.
Isn't there like a new SwiftUI forms type thing from DubDub we could use to make some of these screens?
You are very correct. And we should probably do that.
I'm just trying anything to make it look decent, but build faster.
Right. Yes.
But true. Yeah, July. The whole point is that July we have our prototype, and I guess by prototype we mean basically an MVP.
An MVP. Yeah.
So it's like 4 weeks to do an MVP, and then August is revisions and dog fooding, the typical like cycle.
The way I'm looking at it, from a pure like, when we say end of July should be like, okay, we can kind of see the vision, right? We can use the app fully. We can go from like our iPad to our iPhone and back again. We're testing our own to do, so I'll commit to like a 25 push-up a day kind of workflow.
If you do 25 push-ups a day, I mean, I'd be really impressed.
Is it really that hard?
25 push-ups?
A day.
Oh, a day. I don't know, in a row?
In a row? Yes.
Or in a row, not like spread out?
Not spread. Well, I mean, maybe in the beginning I'll probably have to spread it out for like 25. I'll be like 1, 2, 3. All right, I'm done. I need to get some coffee.
Okay, man.
That's going to make things better.
Let us know.
Sure.
Let us know how you do in the 25.
We should add like we should add like a video attribute.
Oh yeah.
so or link to like a video attribute. So like it's like, okay, like now we're recording to see if you're actually doing it.
These are all actually good ideas for potential features, but
sure. And then so July is implementation, and by the end of July, like our sort of like fully functional prototype that we can kind of dog food properly. August should be like, where do we want to refine the look and feel and flow of the app? And if possible, maybe like this is more of a stretch goal. I would almost think of like start to explore maybe the Mac version of it, if possible. That's assuming that we can install, like we're willing to install Ventura in one of our machines, which is a big ask for any of us. So just put that as like, probably not going to most likely not going to happen at the 90% not going to happen. September, on the other hand, we assume the iOS release, the next version of iOS 16 will come out, and with that, we can start. We should have our iOS release ready to go. Whether we release it or not is, or we're willing to wait for the Mac release. That's a debate that we can have, down the road. But for now, our target is to release the iOS version. In September, followed by the Mac implementation, which hopefully, if we architect things cleanly in terms of the way we lay things out, should not be too problematic.
Yeah, I mean, I would really like a menu bar item for this,
sure.
and that's a problem that you have to install, like Ace Ventura in order to get that to work.
One trick you could probably do is get the just set like an if macro for if Mac OS, and just add the menu bar. I think you do it on the app level. At least
right.
That's what I saw in the demo.
No, but I mean we're targeting like the latest OSs though, so we can't actually build a Mac version without Ventura.
But I think you can also specify version, like OS version as well.
Yeah, but that. I mean, but I don't. But we're using features that don't exist in Mac OS before Ventura, or at least aren't available, like the SwiftUI stuff. So, like, that's why I don't think it'll work. Like, I tried, I haven't gotten. Like, you just can't do it. You need Ventura. I think, as far as I understand. to do any Mac related build, which is annoying. I'm gonna have to end up installing it, but I gotta make space.
Even if you set the macro up to target, to make sure you do that check of like, hey, are you Mac OS and are you this OS version?
Well, we can do all the macro checks we want, but like if a view won't work if we're using something like Swift charts or something like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't think that would work. I'm not sure. I find the targeting the stuff is always a little weird. Well, I mean, if we can get it to work, that'd be great. But I thought we couldn't get anything to work if we're targeting before Ventura.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean? Like because I'm not running Ventura right now, so I can't. So it needs to be targeted before Ventura. But then if you do that, you can't use the later stuff.
What you could do is, I think the Ventura part of it is like, for example, the menu bar, right? So if you just macro that out, but then
maybe if we can get that to work, that'd be nice. I mean, it does run though. You know what I can also do? You can just run it as a and I think the iPad version runs on an M1.
Yeah.
So amazingly enough, without
we're you know what's hilarious is like this whole time we've been trying to the focus was let's make a Mac app, right?
I know.
Like now we've gone in the reverse.
Well, I mean, I'm just gonna end up making some space on my hard drive and installing Ventura. I think because I don't know why. I don't know what the technical reasons are, but it really does frustrate me that every year this kind of happens with Apple, where it's like you need to install the operating system. It's like, why does the operating system have to be so tied to updates in the language and frameworks? That like at least during development, why can't you just ship all that stuff separately? I don't know. There's probably good reasons for it, but I find it frustrating.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, we're at the mercy of that kind of development cycle. So
yeah, I mean, we're not even talking about Mac specific like OS features. I'm just talking about making it work, like just, run. But I don't know. It's just the way it is. There's probably has good reasons, but yeah, that was our timeline review. But we were discussing the UX design.
Well, I think the reason why is so that we can get a sense of like. So for me, I need to figure out like whether or not I want to, because I've been doing a lot of personal like notepad sketching on like how
you just do it in Sketch. You're good at Sketch.
Yes, I do it in Sketch, but I've also like in a coffee shop somewhere just drawing like little layouts of trying to figuring out what would be optimal for us. And the way and it goes back to like I'm trying to like get this sort of interesting relationship with the user of like when they would use the app. So you would enter in important information, anything related to like, okay, I'm setting up my goals, I'm setting up my frequency of these goals, I'm adding information to my like notes into my each particular log, maybe setting up my tags. But when I'm actually using it on the phone, I'm just tap. Like it's like I'm done, right?
Yeah, I mean, what is the the interaction on the different devices? Because it's ultimately supposed to be a Mac app, and that's where we're doing our management. Like, here's the big goals, here's my stats and everything. We have all this real estate. On the phone, what's the focus on the phone? Is it just like a quick dashboard screen? Is it more about data input, or is it just are they all use the same but adjusted views?
It would be strictly about. I would like to think like it would be strictly about like what are my to-dos for today? Did I do them? Yes or no? And maybe like some kind of stat that just says like how well you're doing for that particular to do, right? That would be it. Like I don't like you can add it. You can add it like a note in the progress thing if you want, but I would not want to encourage that interaction. So it would be much more about letting the user like identify like whether they did it or not, and let the iPad and the Mac be much more about like getting a much more. You're sitting down, you can review data a little more thoroughly.
Yeah, maybe that's a good point. I mean, I think writing down notes about the progress is an important thing to do. But yeah, it kind of makes sense on the iPhone. Maybe not. So if we're gonna we have to have different views for these things. It could get a little messy in places. I guess it kind of depends on how we're laying these out.
I almost want to use a different interface for when you add a log in the on the iPhone versus like when you add it on the Mac or the iPad.
Yeah,
because I would almost rather the focus be a lot about more like give the user that quick hit of dopamine, I guess. For
big checkbox on the iPhone, and
think like a swipe
else
down or something, swipe to the left or something, like put it into like a garbage bin.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you're thinking more like habits, where the main interface is the checkbox is the interface on the iPhone, but if you're on the Mac or on an iPad, you have a little bit more stuff.
Like I wouldn't want that interface on my iPad, right? Like the checkbox where you hold down the button and it does.
Yeah, that's
little,
what I mean.
Like, and in fact, that like turned me off. Nothing against the habit people, but like that's not their focus. Was that on the iPad you had the same it was basically an enlarged iPhone, and I think it to me it felt like a slight disservice to what the iPad could do, and go ahead.
I feel like whatever platform you're on, you should like have the option for like the quick I did it interaction or like the full edit. Like there's like a way to bring up like the full edit the log with like your notes and all your stuff, or you can just like say yes, no with the swipe.
Yeah, I like that. And
they're both there, like whatever you're on.
I mean, that would be kind of funny to like do one where it's kind of like our Tinder app mechanic where it's swipe left, swipe right. But then if you tap in the middle or you tap something where you want to add a note or something like that, it will just expand, and then you can start typing something.
Yeah, you could try a swipe based thing. I mean, I think you would need.
Yeah, I was just saying the swipe thing as like a thing, but it could be whatever. Just like something that's a quick interaction, and then like a full like tap in with like a full edit.
I was just thinking, Kotaro, like if you did it as like some like cards like that, like the Tinder type mechanic. You just need some way, I think, of getting the list of them, or the list they're in the sprint or something. We have to really narrow down what the I don't know, like how many of these things you're showing at one point. But you need to be able to get to like the list of them. But if you're just looking at a handful of them, I mean, I could see you swiping, and then the next one will come up, and you could swipe. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah,
I think it's something to explore, because you can do all kinds of crazy animations with SwiftUI. You might as well.
Exactly.
Maybe not.
I wasn't even talking about any animations. I was just talking about being able to like. Just like sometimes you don't want to sit there and like edit, no matter where you're at.
You're right.
Like,
I mean,
go away.
Even just like a button or a detail disclosure to get to the detail screen. Otherwise, you just swipe it, and then that would
basically. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, that would give you the same basic UI in all the platforms, but then the ability to expose a more detailed view, like if you have more real estate.
Yeah. Yeah, and it goes back to like design language of like the app itself, right? Like the whole, all the things that has to work in that app, but the layout, I guess the design language of the entire experience kind of has to come across on each platform. So, and the personality of that has to come across each platform, whether it be the same type of rounded corners, the same type of card, the same type of font, all that stuff. So that you can kind of the familiarity between the three platforms can kind of be expressed. I don't know. It sounds nebulous and designery, but I think.
Well, as the resident UX UI designer of the three of us, we'll let you handle that.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. I mean, really, I think
I'll create a design guide while we're at it.
Yeah,
yeah, why not? But yeah, I think you should just go wild with some ideas.
All right,
because why not? Because we need more UI to work with. I mean, I could build UI, but I'm just going to end up focusing on like the standard, UI elements that exist. if I was doing it.
Okay, well, we should probably finish up with trying to figure out what we want to do for this next coming 2 weeks, this next sprint, if you will.
Yeah, well, UI is like our biggest thing. I mean, we need you to focus on the core interaction mechanics. So, I guess focus on like what is the core mechanic? I think is the core mechanic is it checking something off, or is it seeing statistics? Like, and then what does that look like? Like, I think we need the core mechanic, like, done, like, or like outlined. And
I think one thing that would be interesting, maybe Aaron or somebody can create a view that just has charts. Start exploring that. Just basic charts of like progression. So like a line chart or maybe a bar chart of like stuff that is done.
Oh, I'll do that. I wanted to mess around with charts anyway.
Okay, so Steve, if you can handle that. And then the other thing that we would need is just in the now wonderful class that Steve has constructed, maybe add the extra functionality of adding, like fleshing out all the extra stuff, whether it be adding tags or adding the frequency, the start end date stuff. Aaron, if you can just add that there, get that to work, and maybe even getting the fetch request stuff to be moved over there, or how we can do that, a replacement for that.
Yeah, I think we can both mess around with the view model stuff.
Yeah, we got to figure out how we're going to split up so we're not
we can also
the same thing.
Yeah.
Or even better is taking that idea about converting the core data objects when they come in, and converting them to structs, and then converting them back into objects. So basically a way to do that conversion.
Yeah, I mean, if you were building UI, Kotaro, and you only have to worry about some structs to mess with, I mean, that would make your life easier.
Way easier.
So, I mean, I think that's what our focus should be, like getting the data exposed in as you need it in those ways. You can, I would suggest you just, if you're working on the UI, just mock it up in there in like the view, like with some fake data or fake versions of the structs you want. I mean, that could be a way so that we're not like waiting around for each other too much. If you get some view working using some, even just like in the view, some temporary struct that you make in there, then Aaron or I can then move that into the view model and give you expose actual data.
Yep.
And then you can just keep churning on the UI, and then we can just like come in and actually hook it into the back end. And I think that might be a good approach moving forward. And then the only thing you need to do is you just need to define for us what the user intents are. So like what the methods you want to call are, okay, on the view models, whatever that is, and then what the structs are that you want to be working with. Yeah. And then, I mean, obviously we'll still have to talk sometimes, but I think we can go pretty far if you were just thinking in those terms when building UI.
I'll just add like to-dos in the areas where I know they're going to be called, like in the button, for example. It's like this button to do, save this or delete that or whatever. And then then I'll just hand that off to you in a PR. So
yeah, that could work. We can divide and conquer here.
Indeed,
because that's the thing. I mean, Swift UI, and if you separate your concerns enough properly, theoretically we should be able to work in parallel pretty much on this stuff, and then you can build UI with some temporary state, and then we can come in and hook it up to the back end, and then we could also write some tests around the view model stuff as we're building it.
Tests?
I know. I haven't done tests in Xcode forever. I don't even know what the
tests.
I do tests all the time in other languages. I just haven't done it in a long time in Xcode.
It's actually, I'm the resident person that is like that has this personal issues with tests overall, but
how did they hurt you, Kotaro?
They just, I have a lot of PTSD about that, and I wish, and I don't want to dog on tests too much because I know their value and I've seen their value, and they do promote you to write better code. But man, I always keep wondering, is that juice worth the squeeze? Because we spend so much time Like if you were going to do a 2-week sprint, I guarantee you half your time is writing and debugging tests because it's an art form in and of itself.
Yeah, you have to. We could do a whole talk about tests, but yeah, it depends on. You have to think about what you're testing. I'm thinking like we're building a view model where we're converting things potentially between completely different data structures.
Yeah.
We probably should have tests around that. Like that's typically where I put tests in when I'm converting between two very different models, just to make sure that the conversion mapping worked right. And then you could test. Mainly that's the thing. You're testing that any kind of logic, but I'm thinking more in terms of like the conversions. Make sure that those are working. So if we change something later, then hopefully the test will turn red, and then we'll know we broke it.
Yes.
It saved me in the fast.
I see you have a hot take.
No, I was just thinking about something, and actually it probably doesn't work, about how to like make sure that things match up. But I have to research that since I don't really know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, that's basically all of us here.
Making sure like the all the things match up between the converted class and everything in a automated way, so we're not just like making sure.
Yes, there has to be some kind of automated way.
There is, but I'm not sure if it works or not, so I have to look into it.
Yeah, in Objective-C, I was hacking the runtime to do some kind of automated stuff like that. But obviously that's not a thing anymore in Swift.
Right.
There's better ways.
There are better ways.
Don't mess with your Objective-C runtime. I wrote some code to do that from many years ago, and I never want to touch it because I'm like, it works somehow.
Oh, well, that'll go into our little outro then. All right. Well, I think we should call it a day.
Yeah.
So, if you want to learn more about Philly Cocoa, you can learn more at phillycocoa.org. There you'll find links to our Slack, meetup schedule, and contact info. If you're feeling generous, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcast and share us with all your developer friends. And one more thing. Software and cathedrals are much the same. First we build them, then we pray. Till next time, good luck on your own developer journey. We will cheer for you always.
You don't have to use the fetch requests.